Commission Board of Adjustment meeting on Tuesday, March 12th here at 7 p.m. And we are going to begin with a call to order and proceeded next by a roll call. If David Jansky, Administrator Clerk, can take it from here.
Ayers.
Here.
Brisbane.
Here.
Tice.
Here.
Zierden. Here. And Weaver.
Here. All right, all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge the allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is the approval or amendment of the agenda. And do we have any amendments or a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion has passed. We'll begin with an open forum, so if anyone in the audience would like to approach, please state your name and address, and feel free to share with us any information you have. All right, we're going to close the open forum and move on to approval of the January 9th, 2024 regular Planning Commission meeting minutes. Do we have any changes, amendments, or motion to approve?
I don't see any changes, so I'll make a motion to approve a minute.
I think we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. And we're going to move on to new business. We have a subdivision application S24001 for a preliminary plat. We are going to begin with the staff report.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board, subdivision application S24001 for the White Birch Incorporated is before the board tonight with legal descriptions lots 1 through 3, block 1 and outlot A, White Birch Vista, and it is zoned R4 multifamily residential. The applicant has filed the appropriate application for preliminary plat. The applicant has paid the appropriate fee for the application. Public notice of the hearing was published in the newspaper, and property owners within 350 feet were mailed a notice of hearing as well, per statute 462. The subdivision request is to request a preliminary plat into 8 residential lots and 1 common lot and 1 outlot. Staff report and summary includes that lots 1 through 3, block 1, outlot A, White Birch Vista, are located at the end of a cul-de-sac on Chickasaw Circle. The property was originally platted as White Birch and subsequently subdivided into single-family lots. The original zoning classification for the property consisted of resort commercial, multifamily residential, and low-density residential, with the majority of the subject property falling within the low-density zoning classification. The applicant's concept plan is to eventually develop the property into duplex residential dwellings. In order to do so, the zoning classification of the property needed to be changed to be consistent with the land use requirements of Chapter 153. Chapter 153 does not allow duplexes in the low-density zoning. It does allow for duplex dwellings in the multifamily residential zoning classification as a conditional use. The applicant was before the Planning Commission with a rezone request in 2023 that was successful and has subsequently applied for a formal rezone, which was unanimously approved by the City Council during the regular January 2024 meeting. Site assessments and site topography, access, and lot configuration appear to be suitable for the proposed use and consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, which also encourages multifamily dwelling units in areas within this zoning classification. The property is zoned R4, and the request is an allowed use with a conditional use permit approval under land use categories chart section 153044. After staff has reviewed the application, staff would have one recommended condition for the board to consider. If you find it necessary, it would be to encourage the consolidation of outlot A into outlot B, and that was brought up to the applicant during the preliminary meeting, and the applicants seem to be conducive to that as well too. That concludes the staff report. If you have any questions on that, please ask.
So essentially, we've gone through the findings, and it hasn't met the requirements for these findings here. So the kind of the purpose behind this meeting is to review and just perhaps follow your recommended conditions of approving it with the applicant consolidating Outlot A into Outlot B as part of this. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Does anyone on the commission have any questions? Anything to discuss before we call the applicant up?
No.
All right. Then I invite the applicant to the podium to state your name, address, and run through your application with us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is David Landecker. I live at 8581 Wren Drive, and I represent White Birch Inc. in regards to this plating application. Well, I think your zoning administrator sort of laid it out, and I believe all of you are familiar with the process of the rezoning, and so should not be anything new in a sense of what information you have, other than we're following the zoning regulation plating ordinance. So before you has been a preliminary plat submitted, which shows, should look like this. It's kind of a little complicated because we got the conditional use, and a lot of the drawings that you're seeing right now are conditional use. But essentially, the drawing that's up on your screen right now is the what the preliminary plat looks like. I guess some of the highlights on that would be, from a preliminary plat standpoint, is that the density, or the 8 units that we're looking for, actually, there's, based on the zoning regulations, 19 units would be allowed on the site, believe it or not, but the only way you could achieve that would be through some kind of a multifamily large building, like multi-story. The green space requirements, 50%, and we exceed that significantly. I believe we're like at 70%. So this will become a CIC, so each owner will have an interest in the common lot, which is 9. There will be a set of covenants and just covenants and restrictions on the property, very similar to, or identical to, the projects that are already White Birch Village project. So everything is sort of identical types of buildings. However, a couple of them will be walkouts or lookouts, and I think that's probably about it. The requirement of getting Outlot A connected to the outlot in White Birch 7 that exists for the golf course, to consolidate that. Once the plat's recorded and we have a parcel identification number, then we can approach the county and fill out an application to do that, and the owner's fine with accomplishing that. So I think with that, I'm just going to close my little presentation, and if you have specific questions in regards to it, I'd be happy to address the commission.
David, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm not concerned about it. I'm just curious. The cart path that goes out to the highway,
Correct.
is that intended to be like a golf cart path?
Yes.
Okay.
So, right, and so that kind of jumps into the conditional use permit application, because the plat is just setting up the lots.
Right.
So we can talk about it now, but it's
We don't-
essentially, it's for the development to allow their people to jump on their golf cart and get out onto the, share the lane road, rather than having to go all the way up the public road and then around and back. So it would be just sort of an easier access for
Right.
them.
Okay.
It also, which you don't see on here, is when we get into the conditional use permit, part of the reason it's there is we're creating a little bit of a dike and a depression to hold stormwater. And I'll describe that in the next application, so. I think that's, in a nutshell, what we're looking for. So you have sort of the preliminary and, we've submitted the preliminary and final plat for this project.
Do you have
Won't that cart path be pretty steep, David?
No, it's actually, if you go out there and look at, again, I can show on the topography, it's riding a ledge,
Oh,
and then it goes on to an existing approach that's already there with a culvert.
oh,
So originally that was a lot in White Birch 7, and they already had the driveway approach for that lot to be built off of County Road 11. So that approach is sitting there, and, yeah.
yeah, I drove in, excuse me, drove in there today. It looked like there'll be quite a bit of fill coming out of there, huh? Or no?
Hardly any. More tree clearing.
Maybe it's just that one mound that shows you're taking like 5 feet off of it, but I guess it doesn't really matter.
I can show you when we do the conditional use permit. I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to go into the multiple discussions.
I would say save that discussion for the conditional use
Yeah.
All right.
portion of the hearing, yes.
All right.
So is there any other feedback on having the lots themselves broken into let me just read this correctly. For this request is a subdivision request for a preliminary plat into 8 residential lots, 1 common lot, 1 outlet, with a recommendation that there's a parcel, just kind of as a housekeeping piece, to be able to put outlet, is it A with B?
It's actually outlot E,
The outlet E.
I believe.
Yeah, I was looking for B, but I couldn't find it. The only other outlot is E.
I mean, we can confirm that, but we understand the intent. I guess I would just say the golf course outlot, and then we'll make sure it connects. Because that's the intent, is to make sure that that's.
Perfect.
There's just been, with the multiple plats that have been recorded, there's been sort of outlot confusion, I guess.
Yeah,
I would
it
say.
I'm
appears
glad
to
you
be.
said confusion. I'm confused.
But basically looking at just making sure all the little pieces there get connected.
Yeah, yep.
Yep. So any other questions on the plat request, or plat request? All right, do we have, all right, we will move then on to public input. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to approach? All right, then we will close the public input portion of the public hearing and move on to deliberation for the commission. So we have in front of us a request to subdivide Plat A into 8 residential lots, 1 common lot, 1 outlot. Is there any questions, comments, or motions at this time?
No.
Well, I would make a motion that we approve the subdivision of Plat A into 8 residential lots, 1 common lot, 1 outlot, and then the one that is, it could be the golf course outlot, that's what we're going to call it, to making sure that we approach having that consolidated. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Would you like me to read the findings quick before the motion is seconded?
We can do that. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission shall consider the following in its decision to make written findings concerning the proposed preliminary plat. A, whether the property is property zoned, and correct me if you have any additions or changes to these findings. The first one, yes, the property is zoned R4. B, whether the proposal conforms to the requirements of the zoning ordinance. Yes, the proposed project meets the minimum lot size per chapter 153-045. C, whether the proposal conforms to the requirements and design standards of the chapter. Yes, the proposed project meets the minimum design standards. D, whether the concerns of the affected agencies have been addressed. Yes, the appropriate agencies have been notified and no comments were received as of record. Number E, letter E, whether the proposed development is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan and its related components. Yes, the comprehensive land use plan and ordinance chapter 153 encourage residential development in R4 zoning. F, whether the physical characteristics of the site, including not limited to topography, erosion, flooding potential, and soil limitations, are suitable for the type of development or uses contemplated. Site suitability of the subject property is conducive to the development proposed. And G, whether the proposed development will not create a negative fiscal or environmental impact upon the city. Through board discussion, it's been noted that no negative impacts have been noted. And H, whether the city will face undue financial hardship due to the development in question. No undue financial hardship has been noted. And I, whether the subdivision will inhibit the orderly growth of the surrounding areas and the city as a whole. The subdivision appears to match the proposed character of the surrounding locality and is allowed as a CUP per chapter 153.045. And that would conclude the findings.
Thank you.
So you made a motion, anybody second it?
Not yet.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we, all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. And we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the item B, conditional use permit 2024-002. This is a request to construct 4 duplex dwelling units. We will start with a staff report. If Peter, you want to take us through that?
Absolutely. Is my microphone working? Can everybody hear me all right?
We can hear you.
No,
but-
it's on. Deb would have texted me if
Okay.
it wasn't.
All right, sounds good. So, okay, Madam Chair, members of the commission, a conditional use permit application C24002, White Birch Incorporated is in front of the commission at this moment with, there is no current address for the property. Again, the legal description is lot 1 through 3, block 1, outlot A of the White Birch Vista. Property currently zoned at R4, multi-residential family. And the conditional use request is to construct 4 duplex dwelling units. Staff summary includes the property, lots 1 through 3, block 1, outlot A, White Birch Vista is located at the end of the cul-de-sac. And this is a very similar summary of the prior application. The property was originally platted as White Birch and was subdivided into single-family lots. The original zoning classification was resort commercial, multifamily, and low-density residential, with the majority of the subject property falling within the low-density zoning classification. The applicant's concept plan is to eventually develop the property into duplex residential dwellings. And in order to do so, the zoning classification needed to be changed consistent with the requirements of Chapter 153. The applicant was before the Planning Commission with a rezone request in 2023 that was successful and subsequently applied for a formal rezone to the City Council, which was unanimously approved at the January 2024 meeting. Current zoning on the property is R4, and the request is an allowed use with an approved conditional use permit under Land Use Category Chart Section 153.004.
Thank you. And does the commission have any questions about the property and the request? All right, then we are going to invite the applicant up to the podium, state your name and address again, and go through the application for us.
Okay. David Landecker, 8581 Ren Drive, Breezy Point, Minnesota, representing White Birch Inc. in regards to the conditional use permit. So now we can kind of dive into the plans a little bit. I'm assuming that you all received the application, had a chance to kind of go through the application that we filled out. Would that be true, or do you need me to summarize that more completely?
I
Or
don't
do
think
we go through the plans?
So we dive in with questions, or do you want a summary?
I don't need a summary, I see what's going on here.
Yeah.
All right, so you just approved the subdivision for this property, thank you very much. And the next phase of it, then it would be to actually come up with the plans, which are submitted in the conditional use permit to address sort of the grading, driveway layouts, golf cart path, stormwater applications, sewer and water, et cetera. Those items are all part of the plan that has been submitted for staff to review and for you to comment on tonight and for us to discuss. So as part of the application, we were asked to answer, multiple questions. And again, we're looking at constructing 4 duplexes, which would consist of 8 individual units. Very similar to the White Birch Village project, which I'm assuming everybody is familiar with. Homes would be built very much similar to those, and materials both outside, inside, and landscaping would be like those. As you're aware, this is on the end of the cul-de-sac. So it's sort of a private location which overlooks the golf course, fairway number 17 and 18, has some pretty spectacular views actually. And so that's why this was chosen. If you remember originally when the rezoning was passed, there was a notion that there would be public sewer extended to the cul-de-sac. However, the council approved the rezoning with us providing our own sewer internally on our property and not making a public connection, so to speak. So we will do sewer, but it will ultimately end up getting collected within our own property and then pumped to the lift station down below the hill. And we can show you that more clearly. The properties are R4, the next property to the northwest of it is R1. The resort property that the golf course on is commercial, resort commercial. So it's sort of a buffer between the 2 different zones. If you understand the White Birch Village project and then this one being sort of a mirror image of that, the folks that generally own these are retired or at least over not having children, I guess, maybe might be the right point, active adults, the owner would call them. A lot of times they go south for the winter, so they only occupy their units half the year or so. The units are essentially 2 bedrooms. Commonly, there's a den or something that might be converted to a 3-bedroom, but they're 2-bedroom units. If you had the same kind of property and just put homes on it, 3 or 4 homes, you could actually exceed the number of bedrooms that they would have versus what we're showing here. And I'm kind of indicating that by the necessity of, is this going to generate any more traffic than it would if it had been large homes with big views? And I'm going to say that it will not generate as much traffic and it'll be less impact because of the occupants that are in it. This zoning district would allow a impervious coverage of around 35% as being its maximum. We're at 24, so we're significantly less than what we could be. We're handling stormwater through a series of a couple of ponds that are located 2 towards the south where the runoff is coming down the hill, and I'll explain the topography to you, and then one that's kind of on the southerly edge of the golf cart path that you're looking at. So if you were to drive out there on that cul-de-sac and look to the north, you would have seen a deep depression. That actually is going to become a natural stormwater collection site. We're not going to take the trees out of it. We're just going to simply create the golf path and then put a small berm about 2 feet high on the, sort of on our property, but about 20 feet off the right-of-way, which will allow more water to be collected in there. That golf cart path is about 5% actually when you do the grading, because we're only changing elevation about 10 feet over the course of about 250. So really, while it appears when you're out there, if you don't know exactly where that is at, it appears that it might be steeper. If you were actually to go look at it from that approach on County Road 11, you'd see how it'll fit in there quite quite seamlessly. Driveways are laid out. We have significantly more parking than what would be required in a normal planning and development. I mean, we've got like over 50 parking stalls where 16 would actually be a requirement of a project like this. We have a private water system that will be designed. And again, we talked about stormwater. There'll be, 2 of the buildings will be ground level, sort of similar to the White Birch Village, where they'll be built as a one-level unit with a concrete foundation. The most westerly unit, which is a duplex, and then the one on the middle, second one south, I guess, from the north, that one, you have the arrows going around it, that will be either a lookout or a walkout, depends what the owners determined to do there, but it's sufficient to do that. So here's some, these are the house plans of the units that would be one level, looking at from the driveway and front. Yeah, and then here's the one that would be the walkout level one. So it would have a basement and a walkout level below. There's a couple units over at White Birch Village that have basements, but they don't, I mean, they have egress windows sort of built in around the foundation, which is, I mean, to code, but it's awkward because there really is no views out of it. It just provides sort of that fire safety exit if needed, where these will actually be more of a traditional walkout that you might see on the lake or on an elevated piece of property. So quite a bit different, a little bit different potential clientele on that site. So we won't need any off-street parking, or I mean on-street parking. Just kind of going through it. Stormwater we talked about, and density we talked about in the last one. So I think, you know, in a nutshell, as I look through this and as I examine your comprehensive plan, it really checks a lot of boxes of, you know, sort of upscale housing, low maintenance, senior living, you know, all of those kinds of things that drive, drive a well-planned project. And again, White Birch Village, which is actually built out and all phases are complete, is sold out. And so there's a demand for more units. Folks keep saying, you know, where's your next project? When is it coming? Et cetera. And this will be the next project. So with that, I'll just sort of, if you have specific questions, I know that we've got a fairly full set of plans that go through stormwater, water location, lines, sewer. I think we can pretty much hit anything you might have to ask. One thing that I didn't mention is that we're actually collecting and treating the city stormwater on Chickasaw Circle all the way back up the hill where the hill crest, so about maybe 100 feet or more from our property line. That whole downstretch and bulb is running straight into our property, and so we're actually treating that and running it through a series of culverts underneath the driveways that essentially will go out into this, the northerly depression, which is, you know, just on the side of that golf cart path. So we're actually treating the city runoff water as well.
Thanks. I got one.
Yeah.
A question. It's kind of nice. I see it. Owner is to meet to try and keep the mature trees. Will there be any trees left by the time you get done? Just a question.
Yeah, so
There's nothing we can do.
there won't be
about it.
anything right close to the road, obviously, but where you see that, if we start at the north, and I wish I had a little marker, but we're gonna have the arrow come in, and if you look at the north, there's where that stormwater pond is, there's that whole area next to County Road 11 will be retained. We're not even gonna
Okay.
be in there doing any kind of grading or tree removal, unless it seems like it's diseased and falling our direction. All the pine trees that are along County Road 11 along the golf course, which aren't necessarily part of this project, but are because we're gonna be putting sewer across the golf course. None of those will be disturbed, so that whole series of pine growth will be retained.
That's nice.
On the south part of the project, by the pond, so there's a big section of trees there that will be retained, although we'll probably go in and do some thinning and just cleaning out of dead stuff and debris, so it won't necessarily be a yard, but it'll be opened up. And then where we say the owner will go in, there's sort of the section between that big clump of saved trees, from there up to where the sewer is and the well. There's trees there where there's not going to be significant grading. And so we just, part of that note is that we want to be able to go in there and say, okay, we know you got to do some light grading to get the drainage and stuff to work, but don't take this tree and that tree, and
Right.
so that we leave vegetation along that whole front golf course view. There will be some vegetation, it won't be totally cleared out. And we did that on White Birch Village, which there weren't a lot of trees to begin with, but the last phase of the north part of 2 and 3, I mean, we went in there and flagged that line along whichever fairway that is, if it's 12 or 13, but and tried to keep a buffer of trees in there too, which we were pretty successful in doing. But
That's good.
yeah.
So David, am I hearing you correctly that all of the runoff from this development ends up in that infiltration pond? It all
Well,
flows there?
most all of it from the driveways in the back from the garage towards the cul-de-sac, and then the cul-de-sac go to that north pond. And then if you look at what's up on the screen, there's 2 ponds sort of, or depressions down on the front side where the runoff from the front of the units coming from, that would be going directed towards the
Okay.
golf course, will be collected in those.
I see it now. Yeah.
And of course, when they do the landscaping, they do accommodate for little rain garden devices along there to just sort of minimize erosion and flow and stuff. So you see on this plan, there's some boulder walls showing just to kind of like, capture or step that down. So it's not, not just a runoff event that's running along the side of the buildings or the neighboring properties.
Did you say, David, that will be yard down there, or will it be woodsy?
Well, where the ponds are located, that will need to be cleared and actually created a depression.
Okay.
But between the ponds and the houses, there will be trees.
Trees.
And then from the ponds to the golf course, that's all wooded. So I mean, there's a pretty significant buffer of woods that's not on our property, that's on the golf course property.
Okay.
That will be retained, that we won't be disturbing. Most of the trees that are in the building site development area that we're showing are sort of popple and, some oak and some jack pine, but there's not a lot of significant trees. They're mostly around the edge of the golf course, where there's some nicer Norways, and those we're going to try to retain as many as we possibly can.
Sure.
So that units 4 and 5 have side-loaded garages. What's that little, is that for golf carts to go down or what?
No, that's actually,
Just the water?
well,
runoff?
so we have a grinder station or a lift pump just straight off the edge of it.
Oh, okay.
And so part of it is for that, but the other part is, and although it looks small, it's 20 by 10.
Oh, yeah.
So if a car was backing out of the garage and there was congestion in there, he could
Could
back
use a
into that spot
turnaround.
and go up.
Oh,
Yeah. So it sort of provides two services. One as a backup stall, the other is, that'll be the area that they can come down and service that manhole.
just kind of curious.
That's my detonator.
Look like a little golf cart trail or something, but But it'd be quite steep going
Yeah,
down there.
that's gonna be a little steeper. Yep, it sure is.
Not saying that won't happen, but,
Well, it's not the intent.
no.
Yeah, that should be yard, and again, we're gonna, in that area, I think there'll be an opportunity to save trees.
So you don't really classify this 55 and older, you just get that type of clientele?
That's the clientele, yeah, generally they're folks, I mean, most of the folks that have moved into the White Birch Village project have been folks that have, you know, decided it was time to move off the lake or move from where they were at, and this was a good alternative for them, and they wanted to stay in the area, and so this provided an opportunity for them to do that. And so that's what we've gotten, so we really don't, I mean, we don't look, you know, we're not out seeking that, but not to say that if somebody came in, we don't have any covenants that say 55. We do have covenants that say no rental, and I don't know, otherwise it's pretty boilerplate. I guess we have a resident from White Birch Village here, if there's anything that would stand out in his mind. This will not be, before when we were doing the rezoning, I thought this might be actually a joining of this project with White Birch Village. You know, the association would just grow by 8 units, but that's not the case here. This will be a standalone project. However, it will have the same restrictions and regulations that the White Birch Village has. So it'll operate the same way, but there's enough different components in here that White Birch Village doesn't have. For instance, they'll have maintenance costs for sewer, which White Birch Village doesn't have because they all hook up to public sewer, and just, you know, there's just some little intricate different costs on this project than there would be over there, so they'd have to come up with a whole new step program. Okay, if you're in that project, it's this, and if you're over here, it's that, and we didn't want to create different classes of citizens.
David, which units are the walkouts again?
The walkouts are the very westerly one, which is that one right there. And then the one that's to the north, the one that's then in the middle between the other three.
Gotcha.
And the reason for that is because it's the topography. I mean,
Right.
we could bring in a whole lot of fill or do some more significant grading and get crazy out there, but it's just, that's how they fit. They just fit in the land that way, and it just makes it easier to do it that way. And hopefully there will be clients that will be interested in having that multi-level living, especially being it's a walkout and it's not just a basement,
Right.
so.
You're gonna have to tear up the golf course to connect.
No, we're doing a directional drill all the way from the
Existing
grinder
manhole.
pump, the grinder pump that's there, that's where we're gonna go in, and we're gonna do a directional drill right into the lift station. I mean, we've been working with city staff and, you know, kind of have that figured out elevation-wise, how it's gonna fit, but, yeah, it'll all be no disturbance of the golf course.
You know what size pipe that is?
I believe it's 1 1/4 or 1 1/2, so it's a very small pipe to project through there.
Right. That's what I saw on there. That's what I was asking if
Yeah.
that was right or not.
Nope, it is, that's what it is. It's a dual phase pump, so if one pump goes out, there's another one there to, you know, keep it going till they get maintenance in there, but.
1 1/4 seems small.
It does, doesn't it?
For eight.
I know, it seems
For
that
eight,
way.
for 8 units, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the design calculations. I'm not an engineer, but that's,
Yep, I just thought I'd bring it up.
Joe, Zern and, or not Joe Zern. Joe, your
City engineer?
city engineer, well, not the city engineer, our engineer, and Joe, who's in charge of the sewer system, is, you know, been working together to, you know, make that determination. And we have to, I mean, both the water system and the sewer system get sent to the state for their review, and so there's multiple reviews taking place to make sure that is built and designed in accordance with state standards as well.
David, I was surprised by the number of homes that have been built on Chickasaw Circle Road to the west, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Is the county at all concerned about traffic coming into and going out of that road? I was just there and I was going to see if there's a right-hand turn lane and I forgot.
There isn't one.
There isn't one,
Yeah,
okay.
there's no turn or bypass.
Yeah,
And, no, I mean, they do look at the numbers and they, time to time, like when they did the overlay, or not the overlay, but when they put the granite down here a couple of years ago, and we were building at that time the clinic building,
right.
and so we put in some turn lane stuff there, but they do look at that occasionally as they're coming through, and we haven't heard anything from them. They haven't commented on this plat. And quite honestly, as I mentioned, we're not really creating any more traffic here than would, I think, probably be generated maybe by a residential 3 or 4 homes. So it would be because of the entire development is there become a need. And I think from my understanding, there's this section of the city is, these plats using that road are it's probably only 50% developed at this time. There's still 20, 25 homes or something that can go in
Oh,
there.
wow,
So there might be a time when that's gonna be,
an issue.
looked at, but, I've been in and out of there, and the only time where it's challenging, but then it is on all the roads, is when school's let out and when school's gonna start.
Yeah,
But I don't care where you are, I'm trying to get on 11, it's just busy.
right.
But,
Is this going to be phased?
no, this would be all, well, I mean, the plat will get recorded as one unit, or one, to create all the lots at one time. But the building will I'm not sure exactly how they'll build it, but like when they built the project out there, when they started, they built a couple, and then they added a couple, so we're gonna do all the grading at one time, because you gotta kind of grade the whole thing to make it work. But how the buildings all go up will probably be based on demand of, what kind of demand they see coming from generating sales. But it's almost like you have to build 3 of them. You got the split driveway in the
Right.
middle. You kind of got to build those 2 for sure. Because they join those driveways, so which would give you a combination of a flat unit and a walkout unit all together. So that would be a sort of a normal thing. It just seems like you'd all want to get done at the same time with the sewer and the water system, et cetera. But that's outside of my control.
Any other questions about conditional use before we move on to public hearing and public input? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to invite anyone in the audience who would like to approach the podium for public input. Please state your name and address. All right, we'll close the public hearing portion of it and move on to deliberation and action. Peter, if you would go through our findings, please.
Okay, these are some of the notes I have for the findings. If any of the commission members want me to change or edit them, please let me know. Upon review of the conditional use permit application, the commission needs to consider the following findings as required in section 153.119E. A, the use or development is appropriate conditional use in the land use zone. Yes, the property is zoned R4 and the request is appropriate under section 153.044. B, the use or development with conditions conforms to the comprehensive land use management plan. Yes, the comprehensive land use plan encourages residential development in the R4 zoning district. C, the use with conditions is compatible with the existing neighborhood. Yes, duplex dwellings are allowed in the R4 zoning district per land use category, chapter 153.044. D, the use with conditions would not be injurious to public health, safety, welfare, decency, order, comfort, convenience, and appearance to the prosperity of the city. The proposed development is similar in character and consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, which is also residential. And then the following additional findings must be considered. This is kind of a boilerplate of the prior one, but the ordinance has it in there either way. Conditional use should not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the other property in the immediate vicinity for the purpose of the proposed use on that property, nor substantially diminish or impair the property values in the immediate vicinity. During the discussion, staff noted no injurious use has been noted. B, the conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development of the improvement of the surrounding vacant property for uses predominant in the area. No adverse effect to the surrounding area has been noted. C, the conditional use will not create excessive additional requirements at the public cost for public facilities and services and will not be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. The existing infrastructure for the road is already in place, and the applicant has made arrangements for the property to be serviced by municipal septic service. D, the conditional use permit will have vehicular approaches to the property which are so designed not to create traffic congestion or interference with the surrounding traffic and public thoroughfares. Yes, the proposed use is in keeping with the residential character of the neighborhood and creating only nominal additional traffic flow. E, adequate measurements have been taken to provide sufficient off-street parking and loading space to serve the proposed use. The use is in keeping with the residential character of the neighborhood, creating nominal additional parking or loading requirements. F, adequate measurements have been taken or will be taken to prevent or to control any offensive odors, fumes, dust, noise, or vibration so that none such will constitute a nuisance, and control the lights and signs in a manner that does not disturb the neighboring properties. The proposed use is consistent with residential use of the neighborhood, and the property will not be used for commercial property at this time. And G, the conditional use will not result in the destruction, loss, and damage of natural, scenic, historic features of major significance. No agency acting in an official capacity has documented any scenic or historical features on site. And H, the conditional use will promote the prevention and control of pollution of the ground and surface waters, including sedimentation and control of nutrients. Yes, the applicant is required to follow the erosion control standards set forth in Chapter 153. And that concludes the findings with the one staff recommended condition that approval of the conditional use permit is contingent upon the final approval and acceptance of the city council of the final plat.
Thank you. I appreciate going through the findings. So in summary, the findings that must be met, A through D, confirming that those had been met, and then also going through the following that had to be considered and noting that each of those were met as well. And then also for your recommendation of the approval upon final approval and acceptance of the replat from White Birch Vista, AKA Vista Village, by City Council. I would just like to add some commentary. We've gone through this in a couple meetings, bringing forth some of the notes from the past meetings. There were really no red flags from previous developments and from others that have approached us in previous. All of those things have been addressed, and I think that helped just make sure that the citizens that had concerns over things like sewer and such, those things have been addressed in this. And I guess just for my own sake, I wanted to bring up some of those because I know that some citizens and residents of the area previously had concerns. And in this proposal, I think a lot of them were addressed as far as parking goes. 16 spots. There are 53 proposed parking spaces where only 16 would be required. So one of the questions, is there adequate parking? Yes. The fact that there would be a private well and that it would hook up to a private sewer system, I think that was a big point there, that would be a possibility. That maintenance is, and having this maintained by a homeowners association certainly adds weight to it being maintained in the look and feel for that neighborhood, keeping it consistent, and that it's not allowed in the rental pool. I know that was something that also comes up often. So a lot of the things that were concerned, I think those were addressed. So just kind of pointing those out. So with that being said, is there any other deliberation, motions, questions?
I don't have any questions, no. So,
Do we have any motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit 24-002 with the conditions, recommended conditions.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And moving on to C, zoning code update for an RFP.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will start off this item. So updating, looking at updating the zoning code has been a discussion that City Council's been having for better part of the last year. And as part of the 2024 budget, they did budget to have a comprehensive update to the zoning code conducted. A lot of the discussions they had is, again, it's been quite a bit of time since the last time the zoning code had a comprehensive update, and looking at making sure the standards of the zoning code, you know, they meet who we are as a community today, who we want to be in the future. Just cleaning, you know, making sure the zoning code is, you know, after a while, once you amend it so many times, it can get a little messy. Clean it up, simplify it. I know one of the comments I've heard is make it pictorial, I guess would be the word. So you actually can, it's not just words, you can actually see, you know, what standards are and things as well. And just make it a lot more user-friendly from both a staff perspective and from a public or a developer's perspective. So issuing this RFP, or request for proposal, is kind of the first step in the process. So what we attached is a draft of the RFP. Peter and I worked on. It's a a lot of it is a template from the RFP that we issued when I was with the city of Brainerd. They did the same process beginning in 2020. If anyone wants to see what the responses that they got were, I encourage you to look up the September 9, 2020 agenda from their planning commission. I can even send you the link if you'd like to, and you can see what kind of responses they got. We were very happy with the responses. I think we ended up getting, at that time, 8 responses. I think they interviewed 6 firms is who we interviewed. So very pleased. So that's one reason I stuck with that template, is because it seemed to produce a good array of responses for the city. But essentially what you're asking a consultant to do, you see in the scope and services, is pretty simple deliverable, is for them to come in and take our more traditional zoning standards and update in a way specifically speaks to the city's character and shifts the focus primarily from the use of development to the physical characteristic of development. So this is a very common practice, what you're seeing. So you're going to, what we have currently is what they refer to as a Euclidean code, or we call use-based code. It looks at, like, what is it that you want to use the land for? Like, that's the primary thing. Is it single family, multifamily? And what you're moving towards is, when you talk about the physical character, is what we call more of a form-based code. It's less focused on what the use is, and more of how does it look, how does it interact with what's around it. Use is still a big part of it. Like, it's not a anything anywhere, but it is a lot of, okay, what are the characteristics of the neighborhood? What do you want to see here? And really reinforcing those aspects and focusing maybe a little less on specifically the use. So it's a very a lot of cities, most cities, that's what they're moving on. They're moving away from just use to more form, because they realize, you know, we care less of what the use is, but more of the impact. And so a lot of times it's, well, if the form of how the property is used or how the building is structured meets what we want, that's what we're concerned more of than less of what it's actually being used for. So that's what that says. We're looking at, you know, final product must be innovative, intuitive, highly illustrative, and user-friendly code that implements this vision of the city's comprehensive plan. to that part, that's where you get that second sentence. In addition to a complete revision of the city's zoning code, proposals should include a detailed review and necessary updates to the comprehensive plan to support the revised zoning code. So your zoning code always has to be supported by your comprehensive plan. So it's been about almost 5 years since the comp plan was adopted in the beginning of 2020, but really done in 18 and 19. Obviously, we have had some big things happen in that time period. And so what you always want to start with is there's a review of the comp plan first, make sure it's accurate. It's still what the city's vision is. Again, not maybe it's a full rewrite, maybe it's not. That's what we're kind of asking them to do, is analyze it. What do they think? And then we'll start from there and then move into the zoning code. So that's kind of what this RFP is doing, is getting people to say, tell us what your process would be. From there, we would issue the RFP. So what we're looking for tonight is kind of I want to have some discussions. The 3 main topics I want to discuss with you tonight, I'll get to in just a minute. From there, we'll go to the city council. At the April council meeting, they'll actually approve to have the RFP issued. From there, yes, I need to change the dates because we had originally had it coming in March. So the dates, don't ignore the dates. So it would be in April that they would be due, and then in May we would do potentially consultant interviews, and then in June would be the final consultant selection, and then in June we'd get going. So that's kind of what that process looks like. So it is like a 2 to 3 month process, which is kind of normal especially for a project of this size. Generally, when you're looking at a full rewrite or update of the zoning code, this is kind of generally what we just say expect about 18 months. Sometimes it can go faster, sometimes it can go longer, all depending on what you're wanting to do. Brainerd took just short of 2 years, but we did a complete rewrite there, started from scratch. We don't have, I don't think, need what we necessarily, the level we did in Brainerd. Our community and our neighborhoods are a lot different, a lot younger than what we had in Brainerd. So, but 18 months is always just kind of that ballpark. Expect that, and if we get done sooner, great. So that's what this RFP does. The 3 topics we want to discuss, we talked a little about process. So again, that's the implementation to getting a consultant on board. And then as part of their proposals, they'll tell you what they think their process should be. The other big thing will be what kind of involvement does the Planning Commission want to have? Generally speaking, this is generally the Planning Commissions. You tend to be kind of the working group. You can do it as a commission. You can have a subgroups. Most proposals, at least ones that I would say encourage us to actually consider, would involve community input, so talking to other entities, business owners, things like that, community members, doing open houses, things like that, making sure people understand what we're doing. They're be able to give their feedback as well. But generally, it's the Planning Commission that's working through the nitty-gritty. So just something to think about. You don't have to answer. You don't have to decide today what level of input you want to have, but just something to think about. A lot of it depends on the consultant that's selected, what their process looks like. The consultant we used in Brainerd, she actually came and presented. Jennifer Haskamp is her name. She owns Swanson Haskamp Consulting. She actually presented to the city council back in February of 2023. We're in 2023. She has a very in-depth process, very hands-on. You would see her a lot. Other consultants, you see them less. Maybe they work more with staff. So just something I would say to thinking about as we're going through this process, especially as we're getting proposals in, you start reviewing the proposals, be thinking how much time do you want to spend on this? Do you want to be doing it as a full body, or do you want to have just maybe 2 members be part of kind of a working committee? The other thing I am looking for some direction tonight would be interviews for consultants. This is the kind of project I would definitely encourage interviews. Other projects A lot of times staff we review and we just make a recommendation. But because of the nature of this, doing the zoning code, this is gonna be someone that you as a planning commission in some way, shape, or form are going to be working with. We always do encourage doing interviews. So when we get those proposals in at the end of April, beginning of May, our attention would be maybe at the May council meeting, and May planning commission meeting, depending on our application load, would be to selecting a handful and then bringing them in, depending on how many proposals we get, bringing in maybe 3 or 4. Brainerd did 6. I don't recommend bringing in 6. We sat there for 3 hours for 6 15-minute interviews. They all came. They all wanted it. But I think it's easier when you kind of narrow it down to a couple.
Don't they say you did Brainerd, that's a bigger city, don't these consultants work with like cities of 4,000?
Oh, these consultants work with everybody. So
They do?
Yeah,
Okay.
like
I don't have a clue.
example of Swanson Hascam Consulting, they worked with Brainerd. They've worked with communities smaller. She's worked with communities smaller than Breezy Point. She's worked with communities of 100,000. So when it comes to a zoning code, unless you get to this, like a city like the size of like Minneapolis, and they're just on a different level, between like a Brainerd and a Breezy Point, or a Brainerd or a Breezy Point and even maybe up to the level of like a St. Cloud, your zoning code, the basis of a zoning code is exactly the same. So there might be unique little pockets about each community, but the foundation of zoning codes are generally the same. So that's where part of it is when you get the proposals, one thing to be looking at is what are they proposing as a process? Because everyone has a little bit different of a process, and how do you feel that fits Breezy Point? So that's, I think, right now kind of what our plan is. I just wanted to get this before you, get any comments, questions you might have as we start to kick off this process come April.
So are the pieces that, from what I understand, what we're kind of looking for is for this group to determine how many people want to be involved, if it's all of us or a subcommittee as the consultant starts going through things. Because we could do a working committee. I think we've done that on a couple different things. We could have that as a separate meeting. And then for interviews, is that also something that would you bring to this type of a meeting, or have that as a separate working
And that's
group,
something you
or-
can think about. We can do it at this level. We're in Brainerd, the whole planning commission wanted to interview the consultants. So we actually held, because of the number of the interview, we held a special meeting just to do the interviews. So that's the thing, if you wanted to, again, you don't have to necessarily, at this point, you don't have to decide today. You might want to get before, if you want to talk about it again in April, if you have time to think about it. We could do, if you wanted to appoint, I'd probably say no more than 2, just because then we don't have to worry about open meeting issues. If you have 2 of you plus Peter and myself to interview and make a recommendation, you could do that. Or if the whole committee wants to interview, I think the idea, though, the desire would be for the commission to make a recommendation to the city council of who you would like to work with. Because again, the idea is when this kind of process is the planning commission should really be the driving entity, the ones working on it, and then making recommendations back to the city council. Generally, again, there'll be times that we'll go back to the city council, at different milestones. You'll probably go to the council and say, hey, this is where we at. Before we go any further, we want to get your feedback. But generally, the work's being done at this level, and then going to the council saying, okay, here's what we've done, what do you think?
So what I think we should do is for the next meeting, have it on the agenda where we all come in and have that discussion. Who wants to be involved and be prepared to
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
discuss that.
Because that'll be good to do, because again, that'll also impact when we get to consultant selection, that'll be a big role of who you want to work with and how their proposed process works with what your goals are. And that's the thing I would also add, just be thinking about maybe what are some of your goals? Are there any specific areas in the code that you think need maybe more attention than others? Maybe there's something that's not in the in the zoning code that you would think should be in there, something that should be clarified. That's something I would recommend to do as well. So, and I will just so you can get kind of an idea of what these proposals might look like. I will send you that link from that Brainerd Planning Commission meeting that had all the different proposals that they got. Obviously, we probably won't get some of the same firms might propose. They won't be the same proposals because they were proposing specifically to Brainerd, but it gives you an idea of what to expect.
Perfect.
If it's their business, they must have a template or something they use for a city of 3,000 and one for 50,000, I would assume.
Well, and again, also one thing they'll do is all these consultants is as part of their proposal is they will go in, look at our zoning code, look at our comprehensive plan, do a cursory review and go, well, based off of what they see, they will adjust their proposal kind of based off of, they'll look at your zoning code and be like, oh, it's not too bad. This, maybe we only need this much time, or they might look and go, so, yeah, they do, as part of their review, look at your stuff. I know when I was in Brainerd again, that was one of those things I think I fielded during the response window. I think I probably fielded a couple dozen calls from interested consultants just asking, trying to dig in, clarifying what is the city trying to get out of this? Can you clarify something what kind of applications are you seeing? So they can also help understand what is, is you doing a lot of variances? Are you doing a lot of conditional use permits? What kind of, do you not have a lot of growth going on at all? So a lot of times we'll get from a staff level those kind of inquiries once this goes out. For them to, again, further understand what's going on the ground in Breezy Point to help them make the best proposal to Breezy Point.
David, is it realistic that they can respond by March 29th?
So, sorry, those dates were old.
Oh,
So
okay.
initially we had actually planned on having this on the February agenda that we didn't meet.
Okay,
And when I put it in there, I forgot to update the dates. So kick everything a month.
okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything you need from us tonight?
Nope, I just wanted to get it before you. I wanted to get any questions you might have and then just get you thinking. Again, this is going to go before the city council on April 1st to have them officially bless us fielding it. And then we'll talk again at the April Planning Commission meeting, maybe once it's out there. Again, be thinking about interviews. Do you want to do it at the regular meeting? Do you want to hold a special meeting to do that? We'll discuss that at the April Planning Commission meeting, which is, I believe, April 9th.
Perfect. All right. And we'll close out of the new business section. Is there any old business?
I don't believe we have any, Madam Chair.
All right. Staff reports, any additional? Commission reports? All right. Meeting is adjourned.